Hi, this is Critical Consult, and I have a fun ventilator case that has come up several times this week alone. Here it is. Taking a look at a mode of ventilation that you can see in the top left, pressure support. And just like always, whenever I'm looking at a new ventilation problem, what I want to do is ask myself, how should the vent be delivering a breath? Or another way to think about this is, does this look like the textbook? And I notice it does not look like the textbook. And so what we have here is pressure support ventilation should turn on the pressure and look almost like a square wave, and the flow should decelerate like you're skiing down a cliff. And that's not what's happening. The pressure is sluggishly trying to get up to the pressure that's set, and the flow is jumping off a cliff. If you've looked at my prior videos, you'll know that this is one of the variant types of effort made by the patient, where the patient is working very hard to breathe. If we go back and remember how a pressure breath delivers a pressure, we know it delivers a fairly fixed amount of pressure. It takes just a moment to turn on. You can adjust that with the rise time and make it turn on faster or slower. And the flow becomes decelerating, and that decelerating flow is always based on the patient. What do I mean by the patient? Well, it goes back to those physics principles. We have a pressure gradient, or the voltage gradient. We have an airflow, and we have resistance, or the inverse of compliance. Now, when we think of compliance, we have to separate out clinical care from textbooks. When you only read textbooks, you think of compliance in terms of the lung and the lung alone. But the real world is more challenging. You have the patient in front of you who, if they move their chest wall and diaphragm for you, the vent doesn't have to move those things and finds it very easy. And so when we have a patient breathing with the ventilator, when we look at V equals IR, their resistance goes down, or their compliance gets better, whichever way you think about it. And if the resistance goes down and the pressure is roughly fixed, the flow is going to go up. And so it looks like this. More flow, a bigger thumbprint, or a bigger tidal volume. So here that is. Again, we have a nice skiing down the hill slope of decelerating flow. Patient breathes along and the flow goes up, and that's it. But if they breathe even harder, something interesting happens where the flow not only goes up, it actually inverts the way that curve is. And I always think of this as jumping off a cliff. Let's show an example of that on a patient. Here we go. We have pressure control ventilation. The pressure waveform sure looks like a textbook, but I notice that the flow waveform does not. We have a flow, but it doesn't decelerate. It's sustained inspiratory effort, and we jump off a cliff. Sustained inspiratory effort, and we jump off a cliff. Now, if a patient works even harder to breathe, they're very air hungry and strong enough to do it, the vent can't keep up. And so while the vent tries to fix either the pressure or the flow, in a pressure type of breath, we deliver a pressure, it can't even get enough airflow to get to that goal. You can see here we dive off a cliff and the pressure sluggishly goes up, just like our patient at the start. This is where the vent cannot give enough flow to even get there. The patient's pulling so hard, they're beating the vent to the air being delivered. This takes a lot of work. Here's another example of that at the bedside. Again, pressure support ventilation doesn't look like the textbook, doesn't turn on like a square wave, and we jump off a cliff here. Occurs with pretty high frequency in our current style of ventilation, where we do small tidal volumes, so we're under supporting people, and light sedation, where they're awake and can feel it. So inspiratory worker breathing on pressure support is very challenging to solve. The first thing that I do is I make sure that I have set the pressure to turn on as fast as it can. And so again, the pressure should look like a square, but I can make the start of that square steep or more and more like a shark fin, a slow escalation of flow to that goal pressure. So I make the rise time fast. I make it 0. The second thing I do is I simply turn the pressure up. If they're working really hard to breathe, I go up on the pressure to support them more. Their transalveolar pressure gradient's probably not that different doing this. But when that isn't possible, I do the third thing, or I should say when it's not possible or safe, I do the third thing, which is I sedate them more, in addition to, of course, treating the underlying condition. So here's the original case again. I took the rise time, I made it faster, and you can see here things got a little better, not a lot better. I don't show the rest of this. I went up a little bit on the pressure, and they got more comfortable, but the tidal volumes were higher than I wanted them to be. I used a little bit of narcotic, allowed time in medical treatment to handle the acidosis and sedation component. We were able to do sedation holidays once they had a little narcotic on board, and the patient got better. So these are challenging dyssynchronies. They sometimes are very uncomfortable patients who are working hard, sweating all this stuff. I first start by adjusting the rise time and making it fast, and then I move to offering more support if it's safe. If it's not safe or that doesn't solve it, I try to use things that decrease air hunger like narcotics. Hope you enjoyed the short case today. Happy ventilating.